What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Miko, joined by my guy Morgan here. Morgan, we are back to do another video previewing a preseason matchup that the Lions have this week, their last preseason game of the season. And so far, there's been a lot of good football being played so far. There's been a lot of great storylines to come out of, this offseason. We've gotten to see, some players trend the right way and make, big leaps in their game. Guys like Levi. We've gotten to hear about some of these rookies really living up to the hype in both Terrion Arnold and S. Rakestraw. We've had some scary moments where there's been injury news and things like that. So this offseason has had it all. I'm personally ready to just be done with it all, but we do have one more preseason game to get through.
Yeah, man. I ultimately want to get through the week healthy. Everyone's good. If you're watching this, so we're recording this Wednesday night. So it's after the news of all-pro tackle Penei Sewell. Hopefully nothing serious with a foot injury. That's all we know for now. It's what the team put out after practice. So I'm sure we'll find out in a couple days here whenever we hear from Dan Campbell again. But it won't be till like Saturday night, I want to say. Sunday maybe.
Probably not until like Sunday maybe, depending on I don't know. The minute Dan gets up to that podium, the very first question he's going to get is going to be about Penei Sewell, easily.
If it's not, I'm going to be like, Jeremy, what are you doing?
Right. I just know every last one of those guys are going to be fighting to get the first Penei question. So I'm sure it's going to get out there and it's going to be, or Dan may even start the press conference off by just saying hey, here's the status on Sewell.
He is good at that too. Cause I feel like he reads the room well and he's yeah, he's fine. Let's just, hopefully that's what he says. Cause he's I know you guys are going to ask. So here we go. Right. Just lets it rip. So, but yeah, hopefully just get through this season or get through this last preseason game healthy, get a good look at a few more things that we're about to get into here. But yeah, something to watch for sure, at least. And it's our only home preseason game. So that's exciting.
Yeah. And it is against the Steelers, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Yeah. So probably a little Justin Fields action.
And Justin Fields gets to come back to the Motor City.
Yep.
It's going to be, I think that honestly, I do think that's going to be an interesting matchup to watch. I actually caught a little bit of the Steelers preseason game while I was out of town, and I think that quarterback battle is probably going to go to this last game. I still think so. If the Lions don't have a great showing in it, I do think it's because they have both of their quarterbacks that are still probably jockeying for position on who's going to be the starting quarterback for the Steelers this year. I'm of the belief the Steelers should probably go with Justin Fields, but that's just my opinion.
It's going to be a tough season for them either way you slice it. I think I know their defense is really good, but you got the Bengals in that division, you got the Ravens, you got the Browns. For my money, that's the other toughest division in football besides the NFC North. It's probably the two Norths, I would say.
No, you're not wrong in that regard. But hey, I think there's been enough years in the league to no one should be betting against Mike Tomlin. It should be death, taxes,
very true.
Steelers winning 9 games.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to doubt that, man, for sure.
But all right, man, with that said, let's jump into the meat and potatoes of this video, which is, again, us looking ahead to this preseason game and trying to come up with a couple storylines that are worth watching. The last preseason game is not always the most exciting. It's not the one that most fans, probably pay a lot of attention to, because at this point in time, it usually feels like the roster is somewhat, formulated, at least in public opinion. Obviously, the offseason has changed quite a bit compared to compared to seasons in the past where you would have cut downs during the preseason. But the Lions are going to play this last preseason game, and then after this game, they're going to have their final cuts and try to get down to that 53-man roster. So with that being the case, Morgan, I think there's a lot of things that are worth focusing on going into this game. And I think one of the biggest things kind of starts at the quarterback position, which is whether the Lions decide to keep 2 or 3 quarterbacks. I think could really come down to how both of these quarterbacks perform in this game this upcoming week.
Yeah, man, I think it's a pretty simple calculus too. And I love that you phrased it that way, because it's if Hendon Hooker looks really solid and looks like he can operate within the offense and keep things moving, if something were to happen to Goff, hopefully that does not happen,
Mm-hmm.
Boom, boom. But yeah, that would be ideal, because then I think the calculus is, okay, we're going to take 2 quarterbacks. And if Sudfeld wants to return and be the emergency quarterback, great. On how that new rules that came up ever since that terrible game the Niners had when they had
where they had to basically go to QB4. or had to go to a
my
wide
man.
receiver playing quarterback.
Because it was just so tough to watch. So I really am glad the NFL made that change. Like they've been pretty receptive lately to making changes that like make sense. But yeah, but then again, if Hooker like looks rough, you know, has a few hiccups here and there, this team is just they're in too competitive of a state to roll the dice if something were to happen, God forbid. So I do think then that there would be caping 3, and ideally I want them to just have the 2, because like, speaking to, you know, like you said, this roster is going to be really competitive top to bottom, man. Even when camp broke, there just wasn't that many roster spots that were like truly up for grabs. That's like where this team is at in terms of a roster construction standpoint. So yeah, I would like it to be 2, but what do you think? Do you think that's the math there?
I'm right there with you. I would prefer them to go with 2, and I think a strong showing by Hendon Hooker could definitely be the difference there. Whatever the case may be, again, how these coaches look at these rosters, Dan Campbell still feels like, hey, keeping a Nate Sudfeld around could be beneficial just because of Nate's experience in the league. I'm just of the belief, and I don't mean to say this to be like rude or disrespectful, but like that experience has not translated to the greatest play on the field from Nate Sudfeld so far. And I get it, he's playing with backups, and yes, it could look differently, you know, with the starters, but I think things could just as easily look different for Hendon Hooker with the starters. So, you know, I don't think that's necessarily a fair way of looking at things, but I think if Hendon can take the start, have a really good showing, you know, help these wide receivers and these tight ends and these running backs put on a good performance, maybe help a couple guys make the roster or at least secure a spot on the practice squad, I think that does limit the need to carry a Nate Sudfeld, at least on the roster. Like you said, if you want to stash him on the practice squad, or even keep a Jake Fromm to be on the practice squad or something like that, that could be something that's worth doing. Because like we kind of talked about, this team has sustained some injuries already in the offseason. And, you know, who wouldn't like to have an additional interior offensive lineman or tackle to kind of stash on the roster, or maybe another corner that's, you know, been really competitive, but you just don't quite know how to fit. Why not give that roster spot to a position where you might actually need it, where QB3 is kind of like, it almost feels like a little bit like a luxury to some extent, Morgan.
Yeah, and like just with the court, I love that you made that point too, because like with the emergency quarterback rule 3, like you really don't, if you can stash one on the practice squad, that's what you want to do, especially if you're a competitive team, because like you said, that could be the difference in keeping someone like Egukon, or you know, a Mitchell Agude who's balling, you know, like we're going to get into that, but like, yeah, I would like it to be 2. So if Hendon, I think Dan mentioned Campbell that they would like it. He'd like for Hooker to start the game, because I think one of the beat reporters asked him during the media availability, and that'd be nice, just because I would like to see him start, like, you know, no waiting around on the sideline, just get in, you know, have hopefully a strong 2 quarters of play, get out and be the Lions' backup quarterback. That would be a really successful preseason finale, and no injuries.
Yeah. And I think it's a good way of rewarding him, especially after how he finished last week's preseason game. So I definitely think that would be a good way to go. But another thing that's worth talking about, and you kind of mentioned him a minute ago, Kingsley Egukon. I think another storyline to keep an eye on is the battle for those backup interior offensive lineman positions. And Kingsley at least seems to be one of the guys who seems to be rising up and could be one of the top backup options, if there for any reason that one of these guys end up going down in the starting lineup.
Yeah, so Egukon is one of those centers that they brought in as UDFAs. What was there, 3 of them? Yeah, and he's the one who's really stuck out, man. Like the coaches talk about him. He's been getting reps as the second team center. He's getting reps at right guard. I think he'd be a really nice piece, because if Frank has to miss any time and Egukon's playing at a sufficient level, then you can just plug Egukon in at center, and you don't have to move Graham away from left guard. And, you know, obviously, I'm not saying Egukon is all pro like Ragnow. I'm just saying that keeps everything moving forward if everyone else is healthy. So yeah, it'd be nice to have that, right?
Yeah, and so I think like that's one of the reasons why it's one of the positions to kind of keep watching, because I think even though I know he started getting like a little bit more run with like the second and third team, I still think Coyote is someone that the Lions think highly of. He's someone that I don't think is in any type of danger of not making this roster as long as he's healthy. So I think that's already one interior offensive lineman that you already can kind of bank on being on this roster when they start cutting down to the 53. I feel very confidently about Colby, and Colby kind of has that versatility as well, where he can play tackle or he can play guard. But we talked about this in our last video that there's not really like a backup option, like a firm one, you know, for Frank in the event that he goes down. Yeah, you can slide Graham over and then you're bringing up, you know, Coyote, but then like that's all your depth. And I think like you were just saying, if you bring up someone like Kingsley, if you're able to keep him on the roster, well, now you have someone that can play guard, he can play center. There, that versatility starts to really spread out through the rest of that offensive line. So it's definitely something to keep watching, because if he keeps showing well, especially in this last preseason game, and I don't care if it's second team Steelers defense, third team Steelers defense, like that defense is going to play hard. And so it's definitely going to be something that, you know, it'll be a good test for him.
Yeah. And if he keeps showing out, like they talked about him performing well in practice, so he's definitely somebody I could see, you know, making the roster. And it's tough to do on a team like this as a UDFA. You know, that's a steep hill to climb. So I'm always really impressed when players can do that. Michael Neese has been solid, up and down. I will say, like, I don't know, just from like me watching it, I didn't watch any of his film, to be clear. I watched Colby, every one of Colby's like 76 reps against the Chiefs. That was good. I wrote an article about it on PrideOfDetroit.com if you want to check that out. But yeah, either of them, like if one of them want to step up and make it clear, then that'd be great. Because like we said, like Muti, the veteran that they signed, I was really excited about him for a little bit, his depth, because I was like, man, this guy's got tape, like it's there. Yep. And he got, you know, he's done for the year. So it'd be nice just to get one more piece in there, make you feel a little bit more warm and fuzzy, right?
Absolutely. Let's jump over to the defensive side, because I think there's a couple UDFAs over there as well that are kind of jockeying for position. And I think, Morgan, the best way I think of this and the best way I can phrase it is I look at the Lions' defensive line, right? And I feel really confident in what they have, both from the starting standpoint as well as their depth. And so this is one of those position groups where I don't think there's a lot of wiggle room for like another player to make the roster here, but maybe a guy like Isaac Ukwu or Mitchell Agude could maybe squeak out a spot, you know, for one of these, you know, depth type Sam linebacker, edge rusher type roles. Is that something that you're kind of seeing as well, or something that you're kind of be locked into?
I'm going to watch for it, because like those are the two in my mind that I've identified that have like a realistic path to the roster, you know, like as a linebacker or an edge rusher, or, you know, defensive lineman in general. It's deep, man. Like, you know, you start running through it. Both groups are really deep. Agude's been interesting to me because Jeremy had this quote from Dan not a quote, excuse me. Jeremy just talked about Campbell noted that Agude took over the Sam linebacker duties last week. Position doesn't necessarily fit him perfectly, but he held his own in there while also improving as a pure defensive end. So that's intriguing to me, because they're like, hey, this guy could, you know, play Sam in a pinch. We know he can like be that closed end, you know, be that kind of player. And then also, you know, being a player on special teams, if you're going to be that kind of role on defense, right? That's just something that has to be done. And then with Ukwu too, he's put some good tape out there. Yeah, I could see either of them, but then it's just tough, because like, where does that come from though? You know, you start, if you have, you know, you do the math, you have Jack Campbell, Anzalone, Derek Barnes, Malcolm Rodriguez, Jalen Reeves-Maybin. So you're already at 5.
Yeah, you have 5 linebackers already. And then if you're talking about possibly slotting one of these guys as like an edge / hybrid type of D lineman, I mean, yeah, you still have Hutch, you still have James Houston, you have Marcus Davenport, you have Josh Paschal. Those are 4 right there. So I do think like if there's a possibility for one of these guys, it legitimately is, I think, one. Like, I don't think there's a way that they are able to keep both. Now, the saving grace is that I think one of these guys could definitely land on the practice squad. If it's one or the other one could still very well land on the practice squad and develop with this team as they go throughout the season, and still potentially get an opportunity, you know, to kind of show up and play a little bit, or even contribute on special teams. But the thing that I think is interesting is that they're both very similar in size. Like Ogude's 6'4", 245. Kwu is about 6'3", 250 something. So like they're in the same ballpark and as type of players. And I think the expectation is that they would both be like these developmental depth Sam linebacker type players. It's really just going to be like how you're saying, whoever can go into this game and continue to be consistent, not even just make plays in this game, but who can continue to be consistent. And like you said, it's going to be really interesting to watch both of those edge positions, because I think they both played very well. Ukwu had a bit of an injury scare in the last one, but still came back. I think got a sack late in the game and things like that. So both guys are playing really well, and it's going to be interesting to see how that translates once the Lions have to start cutting down the roster a bit.
Yeah, and I love that you use the word consistency, because this staff talks about it a lot. I know a lot of coaches do, but they want you to do like splash plays are cool, like especially once they know you're like like a Brian Branch. They're like, yeah, we need splash plays from you. Mm-hmm. But not everybody can be a Brian Branch. A lot of people, you just got to do your job right, down in and down out, like up there in the 90th percentile, and let them count on you. And that's how you can make your way onto the field for this coaching staff. They're all former players, the vast majority of them. I get
that's
it.
A perfect way of saying it, though, right? Like, I love the way that you describe that again. Like, it's not necessarily about the splash plays. It's about what you can do and be relied upon on down and down out basis. So it's definitely something that's going to be watched for. I think the same thing could be said about the wide receiver position, which I feel like we've harped on a lot this offseason, but for good reason. Dan Campbell said, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, like, hey, something along the lines of like, we're not going to force ourselves to carry 4 wide receivers if we don't feel like there's a 4th wide receiver. I'm going to call cap a little bit on that, Morgan, because I think they're going to carry a 4th wide receiver, but I think it's going to be by default. And I think if no one steps up, if a Aduri's Fountain doesn't step up, if a Caden Davis doesn't step up and show to be consistent and relied upon, this position is going to go, that 4th roster spot is going to go to DPJ, I think strictly by default. And it's going to be interesting to watch to see if any of those wide receivers finally do what we've been asking them to do the last few weeks, which is just like, hey, someone separate themselves and show why they should be on the roster more so than the other guys.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. Like, my hot take, and I'm not really a hot takey guy, but like, is just a lot of this has been to try to light a fire under Donovan Peoples-Jones, because he's got the most ability, man. We're not that far removed from that awesome season that he had in 2022. He racked up like 800 some yards. He's a good player. He can block. They covet that. He can be that X that lines up on the line of scrimmage and doesn't care if you get in his chest because he's stronger than you. So I'm cool with that. And at the end of the day, it's just not like, sometimes Sam Laporta is going to be lined up out there and Brock Wright's going to have his hand in the dirt as the inline tight end, or like Khalif's going to be out there, or Jameer is going to be out there. So I'm not really tripping about it. Would it be nice to have like a Brandon Ayuk as your X, like people wanted? Sure. But it's also that there's a reason that the Niners don't want to let Brandon Ayuk go anywhere. Right? Exactly,
right? Like, those are hot commodities.
Yeah.
I'll ask you this. Is there a world that you could see where, if things continue to go the way they've been going, right? And we talk about consistency, we talk about the same players showing up, week in and week out. Isaiah Williams has done that through 2 weeks of preseason games. Also has made some plays in camp as well, but he's been the guy that's been showing up once the lights are brightest. I think we both feel fairly confident that if the Lions had to just pick a wide receiver by default, it would be DPJ. But do you see there being a world where Isaiah Williams' consistency trumps whatever the Lions think they have in DPJ, and to just decide, you know what, we're going to go with the smaller wide receiver, even though we would prefer a big body, and we're just going to let Ben be the wizard that he is and utilize his chess pieces to the best of his ability?
Oh, I kind of lean just let him use the chess pieces. You know what I mean? Like, I think Isaiah Williams making the roster would work if Khalif Raymond didn't do everything that he did, but better. I'm not, I like Isaiah Williams' game, but just Khalif does everything he does, but better, cleaner. Khalif's a pro.
And I guess I think, and again, not to harp on the point too much, I just think the only reason I would probably lean towards keeping an Isaiah Williams over DPJ, one, like we said, performance, right? Consistency, doing it week in, week out. But at the same time, the Lions, for whatever reason, Dan does not feel like Khalif can be at his best playing receiver and doing punt returns. And they've been leaning that way even since last season, where they were like, no, he's going to do mostly punt returns, and we're not going to use him a ton on offense unless we have to. If there's that belief that Isaiah Williams has a lot of the same skill set, then I think that just allows you to do exactly what you want to do. And you and I have had this conversation before about Amon-Ra. Maybe Amon-Ra does play more of your outside X position. And that's kind of like what I was saying. You allow Ben to just utilize the pieces that he has. Maybe we still don't see a lot of Isaiah Williams because of, like you were mentioning, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery probably like flexing out wide and all those types of things. Maybe we don't see a ton of it. But in those moments when you do need it, if you don't want to utilize Khalif or risk Khalif being hurt or being fatigued so that he can do what he does best on returns, then maybe it is best to throw Isaiah Williams out there every once in a while and have him run a 9 route just to clear space for an Amon-Ra St. Brown or for a JMO.
Yeah, I mean, that's one way to think of it too. Like, so that's why this is so fun. Like, when you start thinking about roster construction, because there's a million ways to do this, and I wouldn't be mad if they decided to do that. And I would like to have Isaiah Williams on the roster, but I don't know. It's just tough because, like Dan Campbell said it in the quote the other day. Like, basically, like everything we just said. Like, we have Saint, we have Khalif. Like, he's been awesome, and then it like rattled all that off. So. And that man tells the truth. So it's like, I don't know. It'd be nice, but I think Williams will get snapped up. I don't think he'll clear waivers, in my opinion.
And like I said, and it's more so like I love what you just said about Dan and his honesty, because it's one thing that you can appreciate about this coaching staff is the fact that they are able to be that level of honest. And so that he's not being Isaiah Williams, I'm speaking of, is not being lied to behind the scenes or being given any type of belief that like, oh, I have a better chance of making this roster, than a DPJ. I just know, me personally, if that was the guy that like you saw performing week in and week out, or if I was the guy that was performing week in and week out, and I didn't get put on the team because I'm 6 inches shorter than the other dude who didn't do nearly as much, like, you'd be pissed a little bit. That's all I'm going to say.
No doubt. And like, and to Isaiah Williams' point, like if we were talking about that too, like the coaches say it's all about the tape. It's like what you put on tape, like especially this coaching staff, like it's it's out there for competition. So that would be going against what they say a little bit if they did, take Donovan Peoples-Jones, assuming that DPJ doesn't have like an awesome game against the Steelers, which hopefully happens because that it's in there, man. I like him, and it's not just because he's a Detroit kid and went to Cass and everything else, but went to Michigan. But I just like him. I think he's a good player. He's a good kid. So I'm rooting for him.
100%.
And Jake Bates, you too, buddy. We're behind you. Please just
I was gonna say,
calm
Jake
down.
Bates,
you got this.
Jake Bates has probably been the most has been probably one of the better storylines this off season. It's just like dude goes out there and has been, yes, he misses an extra point, but goes out there, nails a game winner. Has been doing it in practice, doing it and so hopefully this story continues to trend upwards and that he just gets more and more confidence. Yeah.
Just consistency, buddy. We got this. Exactly.
But that's pretty much going to do it for this video, guys. Those are some of the big storylines that we are going to be keeping an eye out for. The quarterback competition, the battle of the offensive line depth, what the Lions may be doing with some of their D-line depth, and again, what do the Lions decide to do with that 4th wide receiver spot? Is there a path for someone like an Isaiah Williams, or is DPJ just kind of the default selection if things don't really shake out the way the Lions want it to? But with all that said, let us know your comments in the comment section below. Let us know what you guys are thinking. Is there any other storylines that you're really plugged into? Is there any other player or position or just position battle that you're really looking to see how it plays out in this last preseason game? Also, if you're looking for any more Lions content or any more news and updates on the Detroit Lions, all you have to do is head over to prideofdetroit.com. There are new articles being uploaded over there on a daily basis. So definitely go check those out and support some of our amazing writers over here at POD. Also, if you want to keep in touch with some of the videos that we are uploading over here on YouTube, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and that's going to notify you every time we upload a brand new video over here on YouTube. So with all that said, I'm Miko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.